When working with oral history, we need to be aware of legal and ethical guidelines around both recording people's stories and using their words when sharing oral histories. There are legal frameworks that apply, such as copyright law or general data protection regulations, which are known as GDPR laws. We also have to think about how to safeguard both interviewees and interviewers from harm or distress before, during, and after the interview, and work to best practice in terms of ethics, particularly when dealing with sensitive or difficult topics in interviews. In this video, I will introduce some of these legal frameworks and explain why it's important to work in an ethical way when recording oral histories. I'll also talk about how interviewees can let us know how they want their interview to be stored and used in the future through permissions forms. The information in this film is a brief introduction to a topic that is actually quite complex. For detailed guidance, you should always seek up-to-date information from professional bodies such as the Oral History Society. Their website is a great place to find out more. Ethics and ethical behaviour are at the forefront of our conduct when recording oral history interviews. Some topics can be difficult or upsetting, particularly when recounting stories of migration, identity, and sometimes prejudices such as racism or sexism. Although it's often important and interesting to record stories about these topics, it's the interviewer's job to assess how much distress this is causing the interviewee and navigate these topics carefully, as we don't want the interview process to be traumatic or difficult for the interviewee. Interviewees should be aware of what they're signing up to do, and it's only ethical to interview people with informed consent and the correct permission forms in place. I'll talk about permission forms later on, as it's important that as the interviewer, you understand the process of gaining permission to interview someone and use the recording in the future. If you sense that something is wrong during the interview, you can always pause or stop the session and give your interviewee time to collect their thoughts or set any boundaries about what they want to talk about. There are lots of ways we can act ethically through the process of recording oral histories, whether that's through putting in place a safeguarding policy, thinking carefully about permissions and copyright, or following up with your interviewee after the interview. These are all ways that we look after the people that we are working with. When working with oral history, it's important that the safety of everyone involved is considered. You should consider putting safeguarding measures in place, often via a safeguarding policy. This will ensure that everyone is kept safe before, during, and after the interview recording process. Organisations running projects have a duty of care to keep everyone, both interviewees and interviewers, safe. There are some common ways that we can ensure safety is prioritised in our processes. For example, interviews can be conducted in a public place, such as a separate room in a library or community centre, rather than visiting interviewees' homes directly to record. A chaperone can be present at interviews. This is more common when vulnerable people are being interviewed or doing the interviewing. For example, if children or adults with mental health considerations are involved in the process. Communication between the interviewer and the interviewee is done in a written format, such as email, rather than phone calls which have no paper trail. And someone always knowing where you are if you are the interviewer, and they have details of the interviewee, the interview location, and the agreed times that you're meeting. These are some examples of measures that can help us make sure that everyone is kept safe during the interview process. However, all interviews should be assessed on a case-by-case basis, and if the interviewer or interviewee have any access requirements or other ways in which safeguarding can be addressed, you can consider those as well. There are two main elements of the law that we need to be aware of in oral history: GDPR, or data protection laws, and copyright laws. GDPR laws ensure that we collect and store people's data, such as their contact details and sensitive information that may identify them, in a way that is safe and can't be accessed by simply anyone. This means any data we collect or keep about people we are interviewing must be kept secure and private, and the interviewee must have agreed to have their data collected. Copyright laws relate to the ownership over the material we're recording, the interview itself, and the information within it. Interviewees can choose to retain the copyright of their interview, meaning that they legally own the rights to the recording, or they can sign it over to another individual or organisation. Sometimes this is the organisation running a project, such as a museum, or to an archive where the interview may be stored for future use. Most of the time, interviewees choose to give their copyright to an organisation such as this. If a person signs over their copyright to another individual or organisation, that new owner can use the material elsewhere without asking the interviewee for their permission. There are two permissions forms used in oral history interviewing. Firstly, the participation agreement, which is signed before the interview has taken place. And secondly, the recording agreement, which is signed after the interview. In the participation agreement, the interviewee signs to say that they're happy to take part in an interview. In this form, we also outline how their data will be collected, stored, and managed, both in the interview as part of the project and in the future after the project has finished. The recording agreement must be filled out after the interview and is a very important document. This agreement allows the interviewee to tell us exactly how their interview can be processed, stored, and managed in the future. Crucially, they also let us know who will own the copyright over the interview. Here are some examples of a participation agreement and a recording agreement. Templates of recording agreements are available on the Oral History Society website, which you can tailor to your own oral history project or certain recordings you produce.